Hello everyone. Welcome to our video that's all about our observational research project. So I wanted to give you an overview over what this project is, the expectations, and the various assignments that are associated with this project. However, before getting into that, I do want to give you a refresher and a reminder of what observational research is. So sometimes it's referred to as naturalistic observations. So what this is, it's the observation of behavior in the natural environment that behavior occurs in. So when you are using observational research, you are only looking for observable behavior, so behaviors that you can see. And during this, the researcher does not interfere at all. So in a purely naturalistic observation, the researcher is just an observer. They watch the environment, they do their best to try to blend in with the environment and remain as unobtrusive as possible, and they just watch what the people around them are doing. So essentially, observational research can be thought of as people watching, but for science. And what I mean by does not interfere, there's zero interaction from the researcher, between the researcher and the people being observed. So when I say no interaction, I don't just mean, there's no conversation. I'm talking about, no eye contact, nothing like that. So if you are out doing your research project, your observations, and you find that you make eye contact with somebody that you were observing, you then should delete their observation, because that counts as interaction. So we don't know if that eye contact maybe influenced the way they acted. So the safest thing to do is to just delete those observations associated with that individual. So one key element of observational research is coming up with concrete operational definitions for your variables. So again, operational definitions, as a refresher, is what each variable means specifically for your study. So this can be specific to what you're doing, what you're looking for. And when I say concrete, I mean like extreme detail. So your operational definitions should be so in-depth, so detailed that I could read your operational definitions, go to the same place that you're at the same time, and you and I should walk away with the exact same observations. So they need to be extremely detailed. Part of the reason for that is potential inter-rater reliability, so essentially being able to have somebody else just read your description and, like I said, see what you see. But it also allows for more validity, because people know who read your report will know exactly what you were looking for. So some advantages of utilizing observational research is it allows researchers to see behaviors as they naturally occur. So one major issue with like lab experiments is it's a highly controlled environment, and it's sort of an artificial environment. So you may not get participants' natural reactions because they are aware that they are in an experiment and that their reactions are being recorded. So with observational research, it allows you to get a more natural look into how people behave in certain settings. So it allows for more validity because it holds true to what would happen in the real world. It also can enhance generalizability. However, there are some downsides. So some downsides include, as I sort of alluded to before, the observer's presence may change behaviors. Even if you aren't aware, somebody may notice that you are making observations and taking notes. So that's why it's really important to try to be as unobtrusive as possible. So to try to find like a corner or somewhere kind of out of the way to sit, to where people won't really notice that you are observing certain behaviors. And the researchers have little control. So when you go out into the real world, you don't have any control over what happens. So for example, with your specific setting, maybe you choose a coffee shop. You have no control over who enters that coffee shop. You don't have any control if it's busy or if it's a really slow day. You don't have any control over that. You don't have control over the weather, for example. So maybe there's some severe weather and that kept people inside. You don't have any control over that sort of stuff. And another shortcoming is any information you collect, data that you collect, it is limited to what you can see. So it is limited to observations only. So you can't say why somebody did something. You can't make a causality statement. You can only say this variable and this variable were either associated with one another or they were not. And you can only base things on what you see. So it also makes it very difficult. The next step I'll talk about is your choosing of the variables, because you can only work with what you see. So it's very difficult to parse out things like age and gender identity, because not everybody has the same definition, and then not everybody has definitive features. So, and I'll get more in depth on that on our next slide. And then lastly, something I want you all to be aware of is observer bias. So observer bias is where an individual knows what they're looking for. And so because they are looking so intently for it and they have an idea of what like their hypothesis is, they may then classify observations one way because it fits what they're looking for. Whereas they may ignore an observation if it doesn't fit what they're looking for. So it's important to be aware and try to be as objective as possible. So before going out, refresh yourself on what your operational definitions are. Don't worry about your hypothesis. Research is still good research. Even if it doesn't support the initial hypothesis, you can still learn something. So go in with an open mind and say, okay, these are just the variables I'm looking for. And that's all. I'm not looking for anything else. I'm not hoping for one turnout or another. So allow yourself to be as objective as possible. So with step 1 of this project, you will choose your variables. So I did provide a list of potential variables for this project on Canvas. It's linked in the Observational Research Project module that's located on our Canvas homepage. Please stick to that list. I've provided that list because, as I mentioned before, I've taught this class 8 times. I know the observational variables that work and the ones that haven't worked, so I compiled a list of the ones that have been the most successful in the past. So the ones that you will more than likely have an easier time seeing. So stick to the list, please. What you will do, you'll select 2 different variables. One will be an observational behavioral variable. So this is the behavior that you can see. And then one's considered a grouping variable. So this is your sort of pseudo-independent variable. So it's what separates people from one another. So some potential observational behaviors are things like verbal gratitude, door holding behavior, technology use, which you of course would define what technology use would be, and some potential for grouping behavior. It doesn't have to be anything super intense or scientific. It can be something as basic as clothing type. So it can be something, business versus casual or athleisure. Or it can be shoe type, tennis shoes versus flip-flops. Or it can be, headphones. So visible headphones versus no headphones, hat versus no hat. I did also have the potential for perceived age and perceived gender identity. The reason I put the word perceived is because, remember, we cannot ask the people we are observing their age or any demographic information. So it's based on your own perception. So these variables need very concrete operational definitions because they are kind of variables that can have different meanings depending from person to person. I also want you to keep in mind, if you choose age, understanding that I know when a lot of people think of age, they think of very young versus extreme age, so older with visible wrinkles, but there's a lot of people that fall in between those that aren't young, but they are not elderly. So keep that in mind too. If you choose that, you need a way to differentiate between people, and you need to be able to do it very quickly. So you can't study a person for 10 minutes because that person's more likely going to figure out you're staring at them. So highly recommend, if you do choose one of those 2 variables, you definitely need to come up with very concrete, detailed operational definitions, because the better your operational definitions are, the easier it is going to be when it comes time to make your observations. So there are 2 groups per variable, so it'll be a 2x2 design. So basically what that means is the variable's present, the variable's absent. So for example, for your behavioral variable, if you choose phone use, you'll have one group being phone use and one group being no phone use. There isn't different levels. It can only be a 2x2 design because we'll be using a chi-square to analyze these results, and chi-square is made for 2x2 designs. So step 2 is choosing an appropriate setting. So again, this project involves going out into the real world and observing your chosen variables. So you must observe for at least 60 minutes, so 1 hour. However, if you get to a place and you realize, okay, there's no one here, you are more than welcome to change your setting and go somewhere else. Or if you finish your 1 hour and you're like, oh, I really don't have as many participants as I want, you're more than welcome to stay longer or to do an additional session on a different day, different location. Just make sure you take note of that. So your setting should be appropriate for your selected variables. So some settings don't work with certain variables. So make sure once you choose your variables, that is what's going to influence the setting you are choosing. So making sure it makes sense. So for example, if you choose door holding behavior, but the setting you chose only has automatic doors, you're sort of canceling it out. You're not going to see your observations or your observable behavior. So make sure the setting is appropriate. Or for example, if you're choosing verbal gratitude, but the setting you chose does not have a place where you can hear whether or not someone offers gratitude, then you're not going to find any observations. So I do want to highlight, please keep your observations to daylight hours only and in places you feel safe. I do not want you going out to places where you feel uncomfortable or you feel unsafe. So make sure your safety, your comfort is priority. One criteria for your setting is your setting should have absolutely no reasonable expectations for privacy. How observational research is ethical is that it is observations that are taken in places with no expectation for privacy. So that's how it's ethical, because it's taken in public places. So I do want to highlight there are places you absolutely cannot do observations in. Gyms and workout facilities are one. Restrooms are another. Any sort of private rooms, so rooms that somebody's rented out or reserved specifically for their group, you cannot make observations there because those are not private, or those are not public areas. And apartments and households. So you cannot make observations in your own apartment or your own household or somebody else's household, because there is a reasonable expectation for privacy when somebody is in their own home. So if you're unsure about your setting, so if you don't know if it's appropriate for your variables, or if you're not sure if there's expectations for privacy for the setting you want to use or not, please feel free to email me. I am more than happy to offer you my insight on whether or not your setting's appropriate. So step 3 is your pre-observations. So I provide a template. I titled it Pre-Observations Write-Up. It is due the end of the first week. So this is to be filled out, completed before you go out into the real world to make your observations. So on this template, you'll be asked to answer a couple of questions with at least one paragraph. So for my classes, when I say one paragraph, I'm talking each paragraph should be at least 4 sentences. So on this document, a couple of things you'll be asked to do: establish a research question. So what question are you hoping to answer with your observations? Establish a hypothesis. So what do you think is going to happen when you do go out and make observations, and why? Provide your detailed operational definitions for both of your variables. So like I said before, the more detailed your operational definitions are, the easier time you're going to have on the next step, which is data collection. So for example, if you just submit, maybe you choose phone use, and your operational definition for phone use present is an individual is using their phone, that one is not going to be helpful for you come data collection, but 2, you're not going to get full credit. It needs to be very detailed. I would rather have you be overly detailed than not detailed enough, because I will never take away points if somebody is overly detailed, but I will take away points if someone does not provide enough detail for their operational definitions. So once you download the pre-observation write-up template off of Canvas, you fill it out, save it as a Word document to your device, and then you submit it to Canvas, to the submission box, and this again is due at the end of week 1. So step 4 is your data collection. So this is the step where you will actually go to your chosen setting and observe your variables for at least 60 minutes. So I provide a template for making observations. You can have that on your device, or if you're pen and paper, you can print it out and scan it to submit it. Please use the template because it helps keep your observations organized. A completed observations template is due to be submitted at the end of week 2. On your observational templates, you should include the following information. So obviously, I use tally marks when you're observing, because then you can be sort of quick and discreet about it, but you should also include a detailed write-up about your setting. So don't just say a coffee shop. Tell me what coffee shop. Was it Starbucks? Was it Collectivo? Where was it? Was it, in downtown Milwaukee, or was it in a more rural area? Tell me about your setting. The day and the time that you completed your observations. So this is important to keep note of, because that may play a role in how many observations you see. And that will also help you. The more details you write down during step 4, the easier the subsequent steps are going to be. So how you took your observations. So when I say this, I mean, where did you sit in the business, or where were you located? How did you remain unobtrusive? If there was anything else that you did. So maybe you had like a little setup with, you're at a coffee shop, so you bought a coffee. And so you had a little setup that made it look like you were working. Details like that. And then any other details or trends you noticed while observing. So did you notice the place was really busy? Or did you notice that it was a little slower? Did you notice that there was other important trends that maybe you didn't think about when you were doing your pre-observations? So keeping note of that, again, that'll help, because there is a reflection element towards the end of this project. So any more details you can think of that might be important or useful. Also potential reasons why you think something happened. Or this is also where, if you discard any observations, you can provide a brief sort of explanation as to why. So step 5 is broken down to 2 steps. So step 5A is the data analysis step. So now you've already went out to the real world, collected your data. Your next step is to enter your observations into SPSS and analyze your observations using a chi-square analysis. So to do this, you will create a new data set. So you'll create 2 variables in SPSS with 2 groups each. You will also be assigning your variables dummy codes. So when you download the observation template, you will see I have in parentheses 1 and 2 for each group. Those are the dummy codes I've assigned. It's easier to work with. It's easier to keep it organized. So highly recommend keeping 1 and 2 as your dummy codes. I provide step-by-step instructions on how to enter your observations into SPSS. So starting all the way from step 1, how to create those variables, how to code them, how to provide descriptors for them, into how to enter the actual dummy codes into SPSS. So keep in mind, we are taking what would normally be considered qualitative data. We are assigning dummy codes, so now that data becomes quantitative, so we're able to analyze it statistically. So I provide a step-by-step guide on how to do that. Additionally, at the end of the step-by-step guide, you will find not only how to complete the chi-square analysis, but how to write it up in APA formatting. So, and I provide that for both significant and insignificant data. So your data analysis submission will include 3 separate files: your SPSS data file, your SPSS output file, which includes the results of your chi-square, and a Word document containing a sentence presenting your chi-square results in APA formatting. So this is due at the end of week 3. So please do not procrastinate downloading SPSS to your device, because just in case you have trouble, you need to give yourself enough time to be able to reach out with me or reach out to tech support and figure that out. So that will be week 3. And then also due at the end of week 3 is step 5B, which is your post-observation write-up. So after completing your observation sessions and your data analysis, you will then complete your post-observation write-up. So I provide, again, a template for this. Each question requires a paragraph answer at least. So again, that's at least 4 sentences. So some of the questions include, do you feel your hypothesis was supported by your observations? So purely just based on what you saw. So looking at that observation template, did you feel your hypothesis was supported? Then, do you feel your hypothesis was supported by the statistical analysis? So this is just looking at your SPSS output. Was it significant or not? Did it support your hypothesis or not? Then you'll also talk a bit about those trends that you noticed during your observations and an explanation of your observations. So what you feel they mean, implications of your results. So what do these results mean? And then there's a reflection. So you are to provide a subjective reflection about your time participating in this observation research project, things you learned, what you would do differently. So if you were to do this again, would you come up with more concrete operational definitions? So did you feel they were really concrete and then you got to the actual real world observing and you're like, okay, I could have used a bit more detail. Was there anything you would have done differently? Would you have chosen a different setting? Would you have done an additional session? Stuff like that. So again, be detailed in your answers. The post-observation write-up and data analysis submissions are due at the end of week 3. So, and at the end of week 3, that marks the halfway point of the semester, and end of week 3, you'll be done with the observation research project. So that's all I have for this video explaining our observational research project. If you have any questions, please feel free to email me. If not, thank you so much for watching.